Back in early 22, just after New Year's, my family was visiting friends who lived in a city I'd heard some bad things about. Their neighborhood seemed safe, so I didn't worry much. I got along well with their eldest son, whom I'd known since childhood, and we were having fun hanging out. Back then, I was more experimental and careless. My friend convinced me to try sucking deodorant, a stupid and dangerous decision for a brief high. For those who don't know, you put fabric over a deodorant spray as a filter and inhale the gas. It stung my tongue and lips, and the taste of soap and chemicals was unforgettable. After going through a can or two, we decided to get more and grab some snacks. Since it was late, our only option was a petrol station nearby. We told our parents we were going for a walk, and I threw on my new reflective winter coat. A beacon in the dark, not the best choice for blending in. At the petrol station, we noticed a suspicious red car parked outside. It had multiple men inside, but I brushed it off, pretending not to notice them. Inside, we didn't find deodorant, but picked up some snacks instead. My friend pointed out that the red car had moved right in front of the entrance, as though waiting for us. My anxiety spiked, but I tried to stay composed. When we left, my friend walked quickly past the car while I followed. As I passed, one of the men called out, claiming to know my friend and wanting to say hello. Playing along, I relayed the message. My friend, without missing a beat, waved casually and kept walking, giving them no excuse to stop us. Once they realized we weren't taking the bait, they started the car. But instead of leaving, they drove ahead and blocked the path we had taken to get there. The realization that they were targeting us sent a chill down my spine. They lingered for a moment before driving further down the road, clearly trying to lure us into another trap. My friend, familiar with the area, whispered a plan. As soon as the car was out of sight, we bolted left, using a row of houses as cover. My reflective coat, a liability, was quickly flipped inside out, though some of the shiny exterior still peeked through. Adrenaline surged as we ran. Every corner felt like a potential ambush. The houses ended at a crossroads, where my friend led us to a narrow path. Though dirty and dark, it felt like sanctuary. At the end was a tunnel that would take us to his street and, hopefully, safety. Halfway down the path, headlights appeared above us on the road. Instinctively, we crouched behind a bush on the slope. The car crawled by, moving far too slowly for it to be random. After what felt like an eternity, it turned back toward the petrol station. Whether they saw us or not, they were gone, for now. We sprinted to the tunnel, hearts pounding, and emerged on his street. Relief washed over us as we slowed down, finally believing the ordeal was over. But just as we started descending the hill, a loud bang shattered the silence. It sounded like a gunshot from the direction of the petrol station. Fear reignited, and we sprinted once more, not daring to look back. When we reached his house, we locked ourselves in his room and agreed not to tell anyone. We debated whether the noise was a gunshot or a firework. Given the time of year, it could have been either, but the single, sharp crack seemed too loud for a firework. This experience remains the most dangerous I've ever had. Looking back, I feel lucky it didn't end worse, but the lingering uncertainty of what those men wanted still haunts me. It was New Year's Eve of 2024, and the city was alive with the sounds of celebration. Fireworks lit up the sky, their bright colors reflecting off the glass and steel buildings that towered over the city. I was working the night shift at the hospital, my scrubs stained with the blood of the patients I'd treated that day. But I didn't mind. I was used to the long hours and the endless stream of patients. It was part of the job, and I loved what I did. As the clock struck midnight, I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cold night air was a welcome respite from the stifling heat of the hospital. I leaned against the brick wall, watching as the fireworks exploded in the sky above. The city was beautiful, a glittering jewel in the darkness. I was so lost in the moment that I didn't notice the man standing in the shadows. He was tall and thin, dressed in a long black coat that billowed in the wind. His face was pale, his eyes sunken and hollow. He stared at me, his gaze filled with a cold, malevolent intent. I felt a sudden sense of unease, a cold shiver that ran down my spine. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the long shift had left me on edge. But as I looked into the man's eyes, I knew that something was wrong. I turned to go back inside, but the man was suddenly in front of me, his hand clamped around my arm. He was stronger than he looked, his grip like iron. He pulled me into the shadows, his other hand clamped over my mouth. I struggled, kicking and biting, but it was like trying to fight a ghost. The man was silent, his movements quick and efficient. He tied my hands and feet, a gag shoved into my mouth. He hoisted me over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, carrying me through the dark streets. I was taken to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building was a crumbling ruin, the windows broken and the doors hanging off their hinges. The man threw me into a room on the second floor, the impact sending a jolt of pain through my body. I lay there, my heart pounding in my chest, my body aching from the fall. I knew that I was in serious trouble, that my life was in danger, but I couldn't give up hope. I had to find a way to escape, to get back to the safety of the hospital. I managed to sit up, my hands and feet tied tightly. I looked around the room, searching for anything that could help me. The room was empty, the walls stained with years of grime and decay. But there was a small window high up on the wall. If I could reach it, I might be able to get out. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from the effort. I tried to climb the wall to reach the window, but it was too high. I was stuck, trapped in the room with no way out. The man returned, his face twisted into a sickening smile. He was holding a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. He told me that he was going to kill me, that he was going to cut me into pieces and scatter my body across the city. I begged for my life, my words muffled by the gag. But the man was unmoved, his eyes filled with a cold, brutal intent. He raised the knife, the blade slicing through the air. I closed my eyes, waiting for the pain to come. But instead, I heard the sound of gunfire, the bullets tearing through the man's body. He fell to the floor, his blood pooling around him, his eyes wide with shock. The police stormed the warehouse, their guns trained on the man's lifeless body. They cut me free, their faces filled with a mixture of shock and relief. I was taken to the hospital, my body aching from the ordeal. I was one of the lucky ones. The man had been a serial killer. His victims found in the days that followed. He had been planning to strike again, to take another life. But thanks to the quick actions of the police, his reign of terror was over. As I recovered in the hospital, I was filled with a sense of gratitude. I had been given a second chance at life, a chance to continue doing the job I loved. But I was also filled with a sense of sadness, a deep sorrow for the lives that had. The clock was ticking toward midnight as I drove through the narrow, winding roads on the outskirts of my town. New Year's Eve was supposed to be a night of celebration, but for me, it had turned into a long and lonely drive back from a canceled party. A mix of exhaustion and mild irritation settled over me. I'd promised myself I wouldn't spend another New Year's alone. Yet here I was. The road was eerily quiet. Snow blanketed the fields on either side, reflecting the moonlight in a way that seemed almost unnatural. The trees leaned over the road like skeletal sentinels, their shadows stretching across the icy pavement. The only sound was the crunch of my tires over patches of frost. As I rounded a particularly sharp bend, my headlights illuminated a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. A woman shivering in a thin jacket, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Instinctively, I slowed down. Who would be out here, miles from anywhere, on a night like this? I rolled down the passenger side window. "Do you need a ride?" I asked, cautiously. Her face lit up with relief. "Yes, please. My car broke down and my phone died. I've been walking for hours." She climbed in, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the seatbelt. I turned up the heat, hoping it would help. "Where are you headed?" I asked. "Just into town," she said, her voice soft and weary. "Thank you so much for stopping." We made small talk as I drove. Her name was Emily, and she'd been on her way to visit family when her car had given out. She seemed genuinely grateful, but something about her made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, or how her hands didn't stop trembling, even after sitting in the warmth for several minutes. A few miles down the road, she suddenly said, "Could you take a different route? There's a shortcut just ahead." I hesitated. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. These roads are dangerous enough in this weather." Her expression hardened, just for a moment. "Please, it'll save us both time." Against my better judgment, I agreed. She directed me down a narrow dirt road that wound through the forest. The trees closed in around us, their branches clawing at the sides of the car. The GPS signal vanished, leaving me with no sense of direction. The further we went, the stronger the feeling of unease grew. "Are you sure this is the right way?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yes," she said, but her tone was less convincing now. The road ended abruptly at a clearing. "This doesn't look like—" "Stop the car," she interrupted. Before I could react, something slammed against the side of the vehicle. The impact shook the car, and I saw shadows moving outside. My blood ran cold. Emily's demeanor changed entirely. She unbuckled her seatbelt and unlocked the door. "What are you doing?" I shouted, but she didn't answer. She stepped out, and I watched in stunned silence as she walked toward the shadows. A figure emerged. A man, tall and broad, holding what looked like a crowbar. Panic surged through me. I threw the car into reverse, but the icy ground made it nearly impossible to gain traction. The man approached the driver's side, raising the crowbar. Without thinking, I hit the accelerator. The tires finally caught, and the car lurched backward. I spun the wheel, narrowly avoiding a tree, and sped back the way we'd come. My heart was pounding as I glanced in the rearview mirror. Emily and the man stood in the clearing, watching as I disappeared into the darkness. It took me over an hour to find my way back to the main road. When I finally reached the safety of the town, I pulled into a gas station and called the police. They searched the area, but found no sign of Emily or her accomplice. Her description didn't match any missing person reports, and there were no disabled vehicles reported in the area. To this day, I don't know who she was or what she wanted. All I know is that I'll never stop for a stranger on New Year's Eve again.